Everybody, welcome to this issue of Staffing Monthly, and I hope that your year is off to a banner start and that you are ready to reverse this downward trend that our industry has been experiencing over the last couple of years. I know that I'm looking forward to prosperity this year. I do think that things are on the uptick and that we're all going to see a good year. Again, this is Staffing Monthly. We focus on best practices in recruiting, sales, marketing, and leadership. And today's guest really focuses in that last bucket of leadership. This is somebody that I had the ability to connect with on LinkedIn and just learn about her journey, really being in that operational leader in the trenches, yet sort of director VP role in managing operations and helping companies grow and be successful in the recruiting side, the fulfillment side, and really servicing the customers. And I just wanted to talk to her about some of the challenges that our industry is facing today that might be holding companies like you back, and hopefully share with you some actionable insights to help you overcome them. My guest today is Audra Mahoney, and she's been in the industry for a while, worked for some of the bigger companies, and she really has held those operational roles that she's going to be calling on today. Audra, welcome to Staffing Monthly, and thanks for being here.
Hey Dan, thanks so much for having me. I think you do the best intros on with all of your guests. So thank you for the introduction.
I appreciate you saying that. I generally, as everyone knows on this show, nothing is scripted. I don't read from a script. I like to get to know people and really just speak from the heart when I introduce them. So I appreciate you saying that. So when we connected on LinkedIn, you mentioned right out of the gate, you said, hey, the staffing industry has faced some challenges the last couple of years, and you found yourself in a kind of transition in this journey. But when I took a look at your track record, you've got a lot of experience in really operational management and running this staffing organization. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about that and just kind of, give me a little bit of background just so the audience can get a feel for who you are. But I really want to get into some of the challenges you see most agencies face and maybe what we can do to work through those.
Absolutely. So I had kind of an unconventional start, which I'm sure that you've heard time and time again. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, hey, I want to be a recruiter tomorrow. And so I actually have a medical background. I was a nurse in the past and went through some life changes and found myself in the staffing industry. And so I truly worked my way from the bottom up. I actually got hired at our local office for a screening project. We're scanning in documents. It was like a going green type of thing. And so I was like, sure, like I'll do this while I'm figuring things out. And so we had a recruiter quit last minute, had a huge order called in at a local tech company. And I was like, what can I do to help? And so they gave me a stack of resumes and they were like, look for these things and call these people. And anyways, I was just happy to be really great at it. And so it's really funny how it happens. But there's a lot of similarities to the medical field if you think about it. Dealing with the doctor and patient, it's kind of like dealing with the candidate and customer, and picking up on those things by intuition. Sometimes the unspoken things that aren't said. I think recruiting really does take a certain level of intuition and gut instinct. But I did primarily high-end direct hire and upper and clerical placements there. We really focused on high margin business in that role. And so had an opportunity to accept a promotion to another local town, managed that branch for 7 years. And then, of course, then moved into operations from there, regional and manage multiple regions. And so I love the industry. I'm so passionate about staffing. It's really something that not everyone loves it, but when you love it, it's like in your blood, and it's the only thing that you can see yourself doing. So I really, really enjoy it. As far as the challenges, and there are a lot of them, right? Like everything is it changes so much day to day. And I think that's one of the love-hate relationships that we probably all have with the industry. But I think that the biggest challenges right now, it's kind of like, it's really multifaceted problems. I think that part of it, of course, with the AI situation and all of the integrations and new technologies and things like that. I think sometimes just in desperation mode from the economy being like it is, a company may get sold on a product like, oh, this is going to change it. This is what we need. This is going to be the fix. And there's steps that sometimes are missed to where the field's not able to utilize the technology in the best way or not able to understand it. And I think that another big topic that's going to end up being probably a big buzzword over the next year or two is going to be data literacy. I'm very passionate about that. It's really important that data literacy is integrated all the way through the organization. I think a lot of times the conversation is like at a high level, like, oh, we're a data-centric, data-driven organization. You hear that a lot. But like, it's really most important that all the way down to your salespeople and your recruiters, they have to be data literate. They're the ones using the data every day. You can, push an overall strategy, but they're the ones making those decisions, on a dime. They've got to be the ones to understand it. And so I think that that's definitely an important thing. But there's also a disconnect between the field and the corporate leadership sometimes. And so that's the recruiter overwhelm, the recruiter fatigue that happens now, plus with the fear component added in with the market and things like they are, nobody can quite figure it out. I think that's another disconnect that's probably causing some challenges.
Wow. Talk about hitting the heavy ones right out of the gate. That's there's a lot to unpack there, and I feel like we could have multiple episodes just getting into each one of those ones. So there's a couple that I want to hit on, I think, today, and then you and I will get back together for another interview and kind of cover the rest. But the two I really want to dig into that kind of spoke to me when you were talking about this, one is data literacy. You're right. I don't think a lot of people are talking enough about that and the connectivity to the organization. So I want to dig into that one. But I would also like to visit the recruiter fatigue and maybe some of the anxiety that they're experiencing right now, because I also think that's something that is sort of swept under the rug or, kind of hidden from. And I think that's a very real thing that we should talk about. But let's start with data literacy, because I'm super passionate about this. I love data and metrics. So you obviously, just looking at your profile, you were talking about the use of KPIs and that you would analyze KPIs and you would actually use this to form your recruiting strategies and drive business performance. Can you just talk to me? Let's just start to level set. Like, what KPIs were you looking at? Let's start there.
And so with the organization that I was with, of course, there were standard metrics and KPIs. We had a BI. We were very blessed to have the amount of data that we had at our fingertips. But there were standardized reports that would be shared out, in different time frames. And there was a lot of data that we would pull individually for our regions or recruiters based on the situation that we would share out. And so a lot of it was basic, like task-driven things, like how many interviews did you have last week? How many send-outs did you have where candidates interviewed with the customer? How many new orders did you receive? How many placements did you make? Like, how much GM did you bring in? Like, those type of things. But one thing that I think that I really realized and recognized was that you have to be really intentional about the data that you're sharing and the way that you share it. The information that I share with our regional leadership is probably going to be at a different level than what I would actually want to share with a recruiter. And so we did a lot of almost like I would do a lot of testing. Like, if I say it this way, what are they going to be able to understand from that? If I say it this way, what are they going to understand? One thing that I noticed out of the gate was that when you only deliver numbers in a stacked ranking format, like here's the best or here's who did the most to the least, then the intention of that they feel is that they need to have the most. Well, let's say in internal interviews, if you had a certain number of interviews and I'm only presenting it to you and I'm saying this person was top of the list and this one scored last because of the number of interviews they had, what that tells them is I need to have a bunch of interviews, when really the goal is to have less interviews to have the same result. So I think that it's really better to look at it in a ratio type of situation. How many interviews to candidates hired? How many interviews to placements did I have? Like, how many interviews is it taken for me to place that candidate? But I think that you just have to be conscious sometimes of the way you deliver the information.
So that's really interesting. I love the approach of talking about, instead of just using kind of quantity, where, and I love that you called out that you can have that unintended consequence of people thinking that they just got to get to the top of the list, or they got to do more interviews, and you're converting it to an efficacy rating. So, but the one thing that you mentioned, which I think is the natural next step for this journey of getting to the data literacy throughout the company, is you said that you would present the data sort of differently to your regional managers as you would to the actual recruiter themselves. So can you give me like a specific example of what that would look like and why you would actually kind of position it differently for each group?
Right. So if we were going to look at, let's say okay, so like for instance, GP per placement, if I'm going to look at the gross profit per placement, for the branches, because we would look at things from like a regional level, then we would break it down to a branch level, and then we would maybe break it down to the recruiter level. The recruiters, like I would want them to understand depending on if they're like industrial recruiter or office services or clerical, the gross profit also by branch may be different. In the branch that I was in a smaller market. I didn't have as much competition, and I did some really, really skilled industrial placements. My GP per placement was significantly higher than any other branch in the company. And so I think that sometimes if I'm presenting that information to an RVP, someone that's over that region, they're looking at it as an overall, but sometimes to improve that number, you have to break it down by branch. And then once you get to the branch level, you're going to have to explain that to them sometimes individually. Like they have to see it, and it has to make sense for what they're doing every day. They may not understand. Also, you show them a number, they may not know what that means. And I'll use a lot of examples, like with my kids. Sometimes, like I have two boys, and so I relate a lot of things to parenthood. And so it's kind of funny, but I can tell them like, hey, you have a 90 in math. Like we need to get that grade up. Okay, like what does that mean? What am I supposed to do to get there? And so I think that that's kind of where we miss the mark sometimes with the recruiters. They can understand more easily. I did 25 interviews last week. But if you're saying, I need you to increase your gross profit margin, what does that even mean? And a lot of times they're going to be too scared to ask. But that was a lesson I actually learned as a young branch manager years and years ago. I was not going to be at budget. So, we're money driven, right? Like we're competitive. And I
Yeah.
wasn't not going to hit commission that month. And I was like, holy crap, like, what do I do? And so a branch manager that I respected very, very much, she'd been in the industry a long time. She was like, Audra, have you pulled your SUTA list? Have you pulled who's met the SUTA cap? That's an instant, bump to your GP. Like there's little things like that sometimes we just skip over it. We don't talk about it. And so I've really been blessed to work with some great people over the years. And a lot of those little tips and tricks that we learn over time that are second nature, those younger recruiters or maybe people that haven't, been exposed to that situation, they just don't know those little things.
So that's a great nugget. I love that you just dropped in. For those that are listening, if you didn't catch that, this is an amazing nugget for the recruiters, that if you actually just filter by that SUTA cap and you redeploy people that have already actually exhausted that SUTA cap for you, that is a little bump to the GP. So fantastic little nugget there. What you just described is what I call translating it into the language of the producer. So I often will translate the data to the recruiter because they really care about they get placements and headcount, right? Like that's typically, or sometimes hours. Some agencies do still measure in hours. But if you speak to them and say, hey, we need this level of GP, and they're like, what does that mean? But if you say, well, really what it is it's this number of placements and this number of headcount on assignment, right? And they're like, oh, I get that. And then you can work with them and teach them how many interviews does it take to get a placement, and so on and so forth. And the same thing on the sales producer side. It's like, well, you need to hit this gross margin goal. What does that mean? Well, we need this many new clients, this many new orders, this many headcount, and you can speak to them in their language. So I love that you were focusing on translating that for them. That makes a ton of sense. So with that, this is my final question around the data literacy piece, because I feel like you took it right from top level to the mid level to the producer. What do organizations need to do to really create a healthy data literacy throughout the entire company to make sure everybody understands what the data means universally, but is actually using it to the best way possible for their respective roles or levels in the organization?
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to make sure the data is accurate. And
Amen
we
to that.
know, oh my gosh, that's the $1 million question. If any one of us could ever figure it out, we'd be very, very wealthy. And so that's the biggest problem. I mean, I think that in the staffing industry overall, I think we're all like running 100 miles an hour. I don't care if you're talking about recruiters or salespeople, we're doers, right? The worst thing in the world is to try to handcuff somebody to their desk and ask them a document. They think like that's the worst possible thing. And so, and I know a lot of companies have different ATS or different systems to document, but you have to make sure that the data is accurate. You have to make sure that it's being documented. I know our philosophy is always if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And so you have to make sure it's documented the right way. And then you're going to have to make sure that the metrics of the data that you're looking at is equal across all forums. So sometimes we would find that one data set might mean one thing in a report. It may be called the same thing in a different report, but it's actually pulled a different way. And so that would cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing though is they're not going to tell you that they don't understand it. they're not going to say that because they don't want to have to do a learning and development class. They don't want to have to do more reading or studying. They just want to place people. They just want to interview the candidates. They want to get them placed. And they're not going to tell you they don't understand it. I had recruiters all the time that would reach out and say, these numbers aren't accurate. Like, your numbers are wrong. And I would be like, what do you mean? Well, I had more interviews than that. Okay, well, how did you document it? Like, how the system pulls it, how we've trained it to pull it. And so we have to do the things that get it there. And so there was a lot of times I was shocked. We would have recruiters that had worked a long time and still didn't understand where their numbers are actually pulled from.
I think that you hit it right on the head there. And that is the big start, is making sure that you can get accurate data, and you teach your people how to actually input accurate data and also pull the accurate data out. And I've seen that same challenge. And I feel like, you know, when you deal with software systems in our industry that are constantly evolving,
right,
they'll build one section, but then when they build the other one that talks to it, like, they might have modernized something or updated something, and for some reason they don't connect the same way. And I've seen people like list one metric one way and they would pull it out of the front office report, but if they pull it out of the back office, it would be a different number because it was looking for something else. And it's like, that is frustrating. And I think that's a great point to hit on. I want to move over and talk about the recruiter, because really this industry, everything about this industry revolves around the recruiter. It's the most important position in the entire industry because
they're the backbone. 100%.
It's it. Yeah, I mean, the recruiter does the thing that clients pay for, that candidates apply for, and the recruiter is literally the center of the staffing universe. So you mentioned something that I've heard whispers of. I've seen it. I've talked to recruiters that are frustrated. There's anxiety, there's burnout, there's frustration, you know? So talk to me about that. What are you hearing from recruiters that are in your orbit?
Right. I think that there's a couple of like big hitter statements that I hear consistently. And you know, the sales team, they can win business, but you have to have operational excellence to keep your business and to grow your business. And so I think that it is such a not talked about thing. Like, I think that, I'm just saying from a recruiter perspective, a lot of them feel like a lot of times the priority is on the sales team, and they feel a little like left out sometimes, and they feel a little bit not cared about a lot of times. And so I can relate. Like, I felt that way in the past. And so some of the statements that I hear are like, I'm overwhelmed by technology. That can be underwhelmed or that can be overwhelmed. You know, the technology is not working like I need it to. It's not doing what I need it to do for me to do my job the best way. Or the technology is so complicated that I can't understand and figure out a way to make it work for what I'm trying to accomplish every day. Another thing that I hear a lot is, I'm tired of the constant change. Recruiters by nature, I mean, we see change every day. The tasks that we do change every day, but it's like, you know, I think sometimes what that says is that there may be a lack of communication. Sometimes the recruiters are a little bit left in the dark about why change happens. And I think sometimes some leadership may feel like, well, we're just doing it. You have to adapt to it. Just do it, like, figure it out. But I think that if you're really looking for that change management aspect, if you're looking for the implementation of a change to go the best, it's going to be keeping them in the loop, giving them that with them, like, what's in it for me, helping them to understand how this is going to help them. I mean, even documentation, like, it's not I'm telling you, recruiters think it's just something they have to do because of corporate. Like, I hear that all the time. It's not just a corporate thing. It's to help you. And that's information for you to use. They feel undervalued a lot of times. That's another common thing that I hear, like, consistently. And then another one would be, I'm just not sure how to keep up. Like, I can't keep up with the new tools, the different expectations that candidates have now, that even candidate and customer expectations have changed. We have more competition than we had before. You know, it's that maybe the industries that we typically staff in the past are down. And so we're having to pivot and apply the same things that we know into a new industry, and it's different. I think that there's a lot of those kind of statements that I hear a lot that seem to be common across the recruiter realm.
So if you could talk to the leaders of organizations just right now, one-to-one, and you could give the best advice that you have for what they could do to hear the recruiters and maybe better support them, you know, I guess build them back up a little bit, show appreciation. How would you What advice would you give that would actually be meaningful to the recruiter?
I think that as humans, like across the line, humans you want to feel cared about, right? Like you want to feel cared about, you want to feel understood. And so I think that that's the biggest thing is listen to the recruiters. I know that there's a lot of times they're going to be scared to speak up. They're going to be scared to give feedback, especially like I said, with all the layoffs and everything else that goes on. If I was always, I think it's so important to really push an environment where transparency is okay. It's okay to be honest. It's better to hear it from them than to not hear it and not be able to fix a problem. But I think every organization is going to have internal stakeholders that are seen as the go-to, that recruiters are comfortable talking to. In my past organization, one of our payroll managers, she was very empathetic. She was very caring. And people talked to her. They would tell her the problems and what was going on. I'm not talking about enablers that, encourage the venting and frustration type of stuff, but the company has those stakeholders and find those people. Like figure out who the people are in your organization that the recruiters trust and listen to the feedback. You can do anonymous surveys. You have no idea how many times I would get emails, Audra, do you think this survey is really anonymous? Like, do you think they're really not going to know who it is that says this? And so, I know that I know that sometimes doing those Q&As and maybe having an anonymous option for submitting questions, I think that that's an option. But just communicating to them and listen to the response without butting in. Like let them really think about what they have to say, and then seek to understand why they said that. Yeah. Really seeking to understand their perspective, I think is the best thing you can do to make them feel valued.
I completely agree with that. And it's funny when you were talking about, those people being concerned with, the anonymity of surveys. Like I've been in rooms where there's really good leaders and their intention is just to get feedback and they do everything they can to keep it anonymous. And they keep that, that wall strong and they just use the data appropriately. But I have also, worked with people that once they get the data, they try to like reverse engineer and figure out like, oh, this is this person's title and this is their location and it must be this person. And they're trying to figure out where it's coming from. It's like, come on, you're missing the point. Like if this person was willing to actually speak up and share feedback, even if it's in an anonymous format, like you got to take it. Like that is so valuable. Like don't care where it's coming from, right? So I agree that is a real concern and leaders need to let it be anonymous, truly. Just take the feedback from your people, listen to them and do better. Hey, something just hit my desk earlier today. And I know I didn't share this with you beforehand, but I'd love to get your perspective on it, especially where the direction this interview went. Kip Havel from Dexian. I don't know Kip directly. I hope I'm saying his last name right. I was actually, this was sent to me by Leslie Vickery she's the CEO of ClearEdge. They just did this index and it's called the Humankind Index. I think it's a word mashup. So, but they basically said that 87% of employers believe workplace kindness boosts productivity and 89% see it as a driver of collaboration, and companies that lead with kindness in the workplace are 3 times more innovative and successful than those that don't. And I think that sort of hits the tone. So I see you nodding your head already. So my question was going to be, do you agree with that? Just anecdotally in your own experience, do you think that organizations that lead with kindness outperform the ones that probably don't?
100%. I definitely think that, it makes perfect sense because whenever kindness makes you feel safe and secure in a way, and safety and security is the easiest way to get honesty from a person. You have to feel safe enough and secure enough to say whatever it is that you're really thinking, and to say the truth and not just to say what you think the person wants to hear. So it really does make perfect sense. But I think organizations that find ways to get internal stakeholders to do these focus groups and to collaborate, do an innovation, have an innovation inbox. And some of our best ideas came from the field. It's the people that are in the trenches doing the work, sometimes have the best ideas for ways to grow. And so that doesn't surprise me at all. I love that. I'd be really interested to read that.
Yeah, I will. I'll send this along. I'm actually going to, Leslie's going to connect me to Kip and see if we can actually do an interview and explore it more, but I'll send the link along to you to review it. And actually, I'll put it on page here for anyone that's interested in seeing it as well. Well, this is great. And I think that that last nugget that you just dropped is a good spot to land. And again, for those that didn't quite catch it, having an innovation inbox. So basically, this is just an open forum where anyone in the organization, from janitor to manager, can, observe something that might need attention or maybe need to be improved or maybe a better way of doing something. And they can just submit their idea and say, hey, I noticed this thing. Here's a suggestion. And leaders should really look at that, because I will say, like all things, the larger an organization gets, there is a greater chance for disconnect from leadership, the people that are driving the organization, down to the people that are really driving the organization. So I think that's a great tip, and I would encourage anyone watching this to set that up. It's free to do, and it's probably going to make you innovative beyond your peers. So. Audra, I'm grateful for you taking time out of your day, being here, and just sharing a little bit about your experience. If anybody wants to reach out to you and talk more about these ideas or any of the things that you've implemented, in your staffing journey, which is really impressive, looking at your LinkedIn of all the stuff that you've accomplished as the regional operations manager, or if anyone wants to talk to you about open roles, positions, or different opportunities, what's the best way that they can talk to you?
Absolutely. Just feel free to email me and reach out via LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, looking to engage and open to conversations.
Awesome. I'll get all those links right on page here so people can connect with you. And again, I appreciate you being here.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity.